When Jacqueline McInnes would return to the set in the fall of 2025, her fifth child newly born, her presence radiant and grounded, something shifted not only in the production rhythm of the bold and the beautiful but in the collective imagination of its audience. Her real-life maternity seemed to mirror Steffy Forrester Finnegan's fictional crossroad, a woman torn between rebirth and ruin, love and deception, family and legacy. The showrunners had a choice, either to quietly reintegrate Steffy into the narrative of fashion and power politics, or to turn her return into a narrative detonator. And what better way to do so than with a storyline that would ripple through every core relationship and moral boundary, a pregnancy twist. The logic was airtight. With Hope for the future undergoing restructuring and Ridge returning to assert patriarchal control, Steffy was already positioned at a moral and emotional intersection. Her leadership at Forrester Creations was under scrutiny. Her private life, though seemingly stable, simmered with unresolved tension. The ghost of Luna Nozawa, her husband Finn's complicated emotional connection to the woman whose life and psyche had been shattered, still lingered in every unspoken argument. And hovering over them all was Sheila, the eternal shadow, the mother-in-law who refused to die in memory or in influence. Within this volatile emotional architecture, the possibility of a pregnancy was not just plausible, it was narrative destiny. When Steffy first began feeling the subtle shifts, the dizziness, the fatigue, she dismissed them as stress. After all, she was carrying Forrester on her shoulders while trying to hold her family together. But soap operas thrive on the irony of denial. The audience would see what she refused to see, that every symptom was more than exhaustion, that fate was already writing its next chapter inside her. The reveal would come not through confession, but through confrontation. Perhaps Finn, ever the physician, would notice first. Perhaps a medical emergency at the hospital would lead to an accidental test. The moment he realized, the camera would catch that flicker in his eyes, wonder, fear, and something unspoken that neither of them could name. Because this pregnancy would not be a blessing, it would be a mirror. The question would not be how, but whose. Steffy's mind, logical yet scarred by years of betrayal and danger, would spiral toward the most terrible possibility. Could this child be Finn's or someone else's, a consequence of a night of vulnerability, confusion, or worse, manipulation? In soap storytelling, parentage is never just biology, it's morality, it's lineage, it's control. A child in this world is always an empire in miniature, a stake in a family's future. From a creative standpoint, integrating this pregnancy would also unify the show's three central arcs, Forrester, Spencer, and Nozawa, in one devastating thread. Luna's descent into emotional chaos, Finn's divided loyalty, and Steffy's fragile stability would all collide under the weight of this unborn life. If Finn's compassion for Luna had ever crossed into ambiguity, if Sheila's machinations had ever blurred the line between empathy and desire, then Steffy's pregnancy could become the most painful question of all. Is she carrying a child of love or of betrayal? The writers, if bold enough, could craft this storyline not as a scandal, but as a psychological unraveling. Steffy's strength has always been her composure, her ability to wield grace under fire. But this arc could strip that facade away, showing her as human, haunted, desperate. Imagine her sitting alone in the cliff house, the sound of the ocean crashing against the rocks, her hand resting protectively on her abdomen as she recalls Luna's face, the same face Finn once refused to condemn. The fear that her husband's compassion might have been something more becomes a poison she can't expel. And then there's Sheila, ever perceptive, ever waiting. The possibility of a grandchild, her grandchild, gives her a new weapon. Sheila could re-enter stealthily, claiming concern for Finn, only to manipulate Steffy's doubt. Blood doesn't lie, she would whisper, twisting science into threat. She could even tamper with medical records, plant false DNA results, forcing Steffy to question not only her marriage, but her sanity. The brilliance of such a twist lies not in shock value, but in how it tests Steffy's very identity as a woman who has survived betrayal, yet never surrendered her dignity. The audience would watch her oscillate between defiance and despair, her every decision a tightrope walk between trust and terror. At the same time, the pregnancy arc could serve as the emotional keystone for the show's broader themes: power, legacy, and moral inheritance. Ridge, ever the patriarch, would see in the unborn child another reason to protect his daughter's public image, perhaps even to tighten his grip on Forrester creations. Brooke, torn as always between maternal empathy and romantic loyalty, would find herself in the impossible position of comforting Steffy while knowing the scandal could destroy hope for the future's recovery. Hope herself, ironically, might be the only one who truly sees Steffy's pain, not as rivalry but as reflection. Both women, bound by shared motherhood and endless cycles of male ambition, would understand what it means to be reduced to a headline in a world run by legacy. Finn's role in all this would be the most tragic. He would fight to prove his innocence and his devotion, but in doing so, his every gesture might appear guilty. His medical expertise, once a tool for healing, becomes a curse. He knows too much about biology, too much about what can be faked, altered, or manipulated. And Luna, poor, fractured Luna, might become the accidental catalyst once more. If she regains her clarity and learns of Steffy's condition, her reaction could determine everything. Would she see the child as her replacement or her redemption? Would she confess secrets long buried, perhaps revealing that she herself was manipulated into intimacy she never consented to? The layers of guilt, sympathy, and trauma would create an emotional labyrinth that no one could escape unscathed. Sheila's presence would turn that labyrinth into a minefield. A pregnancy gives her leverage, and leverage is Sheila's lifeblood. The show could depict her as a ghostly puppeteer, feeding misinformation to both Finn and Steffy, turning love into paranoia. At one point, perhaps, she could present falsified lab results proving the baby isn't Finn's, pushing Steffy toward breakdown. Yet the genius of the bold and the beautiful lies in its reversals, because just when the audience believes Sheila has won, truth could twist again. The real father might indeed be Finn, but by then, the damage would be irreparable. From a meta-narrative standpoint, this arc also mirrors Jacqueline's real-life transition, her ability to embody strength even amid vulnerability. The show's timing, her post-maternity return, and fan speculation all align perfectly for a rating storm. Fans crave unpredictability, but they also crave emotional truth. Steffy's pregnancy could be that rare plotline that offers both the visceral shock of scandal and the deep empathy of motherhood tested by fear. It would also recenter the show around women's emotional agency, a refreshing pivot from the male-dominated corporate wars of recent months. If written with nuance, the pregnancy wouldn't merely reignite old feuds but redefine them. Ridge's protectiveness could drive a wedge between him and Finn, forcing the men to confront their competing ideas of family. Bill Spencer's involvement, whether as a silent investor in the medical cover-up or as a man torn between loyalty and morality, could tether the Spencers back into the heart of the narrative. Even Hope, witnessing Steffy's unraveling, might question her own moral compromises at Forrester, realizing how ambition and intimacy are woven from the same fragile fabric. The emotional crescendo would come when Steffy finally learns the truth, not just about the baby's paternity, but about the network of deceit surrounding it. Imagine her confronting Sheila in the dim light of the hospital corridor, her voice trembling not with fear but fury. "You didn't just ruin lives," she could say. "You rewrote them." And Sheila, with that chilling smile, might reply, "I don't rewrite, darling. I restore balance." That confrontation could mark the end of one era and the beginning of another, the moment when Steffy, broken yet unyielding, reclaims her narrative not as a victim, but as the mother of a new generation born from both chaos and clarity. The aftermath would ripple for months. If the baby is Finn's, the couple must rebuild their marriage on fractured trust, navigating the haunting question of how close he came to betrayal. If the child is revealed to be the product of manipulation, genetic tampering, drug-induced interference, or Sheila's twisted experiment, the stakes would rise beyond personal tragedy into moral horror. The show could even explore the ethical weight of motherhood itself. What does it mean to love a child whose very existence was forged through deceit? Can purity emerge from corruption, innocence from sin? By weaving Jacqueline's real-life maternity into the fictional tapestry, the bold and the beautiful would achieve what all great soap storytelling strives for: emotional realism disguised as melodrama. The audience would not merely watch Steffy struggle, they would feel it, projecting their own fears and hopes onto her. Her body would become a battlefield between legacy and liberation, her womb both sanctuary and curse. Through her, the show could pose its most timeless question: in a world built on illusion, what is truly ours to claim? Our love, our family, or just the story we tell ourselves about them? When the final credits roll on that eventual episode, Steffy could be seen standing on the cliffs, the wind tangling her hair, the ocean roaring below, a recurring motif of freedom and fragility. She might cradle her belly with one hand, her face unreadable. Behind her, Finn could appear, unseen.